Hello, everyone. Rachel Weaver here. I am a part of the faculty at Lighthouse Writers Workshop as well as the staff. I've been putting together a series of videos in which I ask other members of the faculty a crafting question. So today we have Gerard with us. Thanks for
Hi,
being
how are
here.
you? Thanks for having me.
Sarah is going to teach a class for us this fall, her very first one. So she is one of our newer members of our faculty at Lighthouse. We're happy to have you. So my question for you today, it has to do with structure, finding structure that works in creative nonfiction and or memoir. So I'm mostly wondering, it seems to me that most of us start writing about our lives by writing the whole story of our lives, or sort of a vast expanse of lots of different things that have happened in our lives. And then the next step perhaps is starting to figure out how to get that to work together, which elements of those work together. So I wonder if you could speak as someone who has written a book of creative nonfiction called Sunshine State. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how to go about that as a memoir writer or a creative nonfiction writer, meaning taking a little bit more of a journalistic approach. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about structure and how to find it.
Yeah, it's difficult because time is like just continuous, and it's not as if there are signposts that point out to us where significant stories in our lives begin and end. It's more of a feeling that we have at those moments, right? That something really important has happened that changes us forever, or something that we realize in retrospect that at a certain point in our lives we embarked on an important journey that we finally understand. And so the first thing I think that that a person has to do is find that container. Where does the story begin and end? And from there, the shape really becomes more apparent. And we were talking a little bit earlier about artistic elements that are common across all disciplines. One of them is contrast. It allows us to see the difference between things, and so, and we feel that contrast in our lives. Like, oh, I always thought things were one way, and now I suddenly realize, I'm shocked to realize that they're actually quite another way. And so, kind of shedding light on that contrast, to use a mixed metaphor, but that it's that feeling of significant difference that I think kind of allows us to feel the shape of our piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm wondering how best to go about that. I mean, do you find that you have to think about it really hard and you come to it through sort of a cognitive channel, or do you think, meaning you come to the shape of how to tell the story you're trying to tell through a cognitive channel, or do you think that happens by writing draft after draft after draft and watching it emerge?
Yeah, I think we have to write draft after draft after draft in order to see the patterns emerge. We see, again, to use the sort of artistic element that holds true across all disciplines, pattern is something that gives our stories a sense of coherence. And it's, I think, a matter of, well, I'll put it this way, I can't edit something that I haven't written yet, so my first drafts they're not really drafts. Actually, they're more like, they're Word documents that look like, to anybody but me, look like just gobbledygook. It's just like a bunch of notes I've emailed to myself, or taken them the notes app on my phone, or typed out from my notebook, or dictated into my into my phone or something, and then emailed to myself. And really, any way that I can capture that information and put it somewhere so that I can see it and work with it as a material, that's how I begin to see patterns emerge in my work. Sometimes I'll even highlight them in the Word documents, like, oh, I'm seeing this motif repeating, and I make it visible to myself so that I can work with it, move it around, and put it into a sequence, whether it's chronological or some other kind of pattern that I'm using to structure the work. Yeah. So,
Sorry,
yeah.
I interrupted you.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just a draft after draft. Yeah. In order to kind of make those patterns visible. And part of that entails cutting things out of the work too, that might obscure that pattern, you know, that might misdirect the reader and cause them to make a connection that you didn't want them to make.
And when I'm interested in when you were working on your book Sunshine State, which is a collection of essays, did the shape of it change a lot from early drafts to final drafts, or was there ever a point where you were like, I don't know if this is ever going to come together?
Well, I sold the book on proposal, and then I had a year, according to my contract, a year to write it. And I didn't get paid a lot for the proposal, so I was in a rush to finish it anyway. But the proposal looks very different from the published work, from what it suggested the published work would look like. And I cut a couple of essays. I combined some other essays. Some of them I'd already finished and published, but was editing again for the book. And the process was that the essays that were reported pieces, that were journalistic, I kind of wrote and sent to my editor, who would read through them and send me notes as I was beginning another essay. So I had many essays in process at one time. I was like, or finishing. I might be in the finishing stage of one and have two others that I was either reporting or actively writing at the time. Which ended up being beneficial because I was thinking I was having to hold all of these essays in mind at once. I was drawing connections across all of them, which helped me to give the book an arc. So it reads as a collection of essays, but also kind of like a memoir and essays. The pieces are chronological, and the order in which they appear in the book kind of answer each other. So there's an essay about my parents' 4 years in Amway when I was a kid, which is a multi-level marketing scheme or a pyramid scheme, which looked at, how did this inform my ideas of success, capitalism as a young person, and was scrutinizing that. And then the very next essay is about homelessness in Florida, and I profile a formerly homeless minister who hosts a soup kitchen in a church in St. Petersburg. So anyway, the whole sequence of the book came out of the kind of my thinking about how patterns emerged across the essays.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today, Sarah. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Rachel.